Hello, CO 150 students. I am here to give you some next steps in your process and progress on A3. You will be hopefully listening to this on Wednesday, so you should know that your A3 draft is due 1 week from today. So if you are still in the midst of generating ideas, please reach out and set up an appointment with me for office hours. Know that I have lots of availability today, Wednesday, to meet with you, or shoot me an email for another time. The purpose of this video, though, is to walk you through the importance of counter argument, which is really another way to build ethos. So counter arguments are potential opposing claims, but I want you to consider the fact that counter arguments aren't like direct opposites of the thing that you're saying. So for example, if you're proposing like that people, in order for people to use beaches, they have to participate in a half an hour of trash cleanup every time they come or something like that to prevent plastics from getting into the ocean. The counter argument wouldn't be like, oh, plastics going into the ocean isn't a bad thing. The counter argument might be something like, well, it might be really difficult to compel people to clean up trash. And is there really that much trash that every person who comes to the beach would have to clean it up? That sort of thing. So it's not a direct opposite. It's just some considerations that your stakeholder might have that would prevent them from 100% accepting your proposal as it is written. So first of all, some notes on counter arguments. You use counter arguments all the time in regular life. It is natural and embedded in your process of logic. So I want you to consider for a moment like the time pre-quarantine where you might have asked your roommate, can I borrow your car to go to a concert at Red Rocks? And you might have said something like this: I'd love to borrow your car to go to Red Rocks. I know I'm a total slob, but believe me, I will take good care of your car. I will leave it in pristine condition. You are asking, when you're asking for that privilege of using your roommate's car, you're sort of anticipating the things that they might say. Yeah, I know my bedroom's a mess, but don't worry, I treat my car totally differently and I'll treat your car very differently. That sort of thing. So we naturally encounter and address counter arguments all the time in regular old conversation. And addressing counter arguments is really a way of being a responsible conversationalist, knowing what simultaneous conversations are happening, anticipating what your listener might be thinking about as they're hearing you, that sort of thing. So they're sort of naturally embedded in the way that we think. But in order to identify counter arguments, what do you have to think about? You have to consider what your stakeholders' values are, what their priorities are, what their limits on budget and finances and time and all of those things, and how those intersect with the thing that you're asking them to do. So they might love your idea in theory, but they might not love that what you're asking them to do is spend a lot of money in order to, help address some aspect of, let's say, the lack of sustainability in the clothing business, that sort of thing. In other words, in order to prepare for addressing counter arguments, you have to know your stakeholder well, which is part of what the stakeholder audience analysis was asking that you do, which is to consider who the person is that you're addressing and what kinds of counter arguments they might have in their mind as they're listening to your proposal. So again, you have to think about what the potential objections or opposing claims may be, and then you have to hold those up to your reasons and evidence. Do your reasons and evidence hold up against those counter arguments, or do you need to provide reasons and evidence that will address those counter arguments? So this thinking about counter arguments will help you understand what kinds of research that you might have to do in order to supplement your A2 research, or what kind of research that you have to do that is very specific to A3. Like for example, in A2, it's unlikely that you did any sort of research about cost of materials, but that might be something that you need to figure out in order to propose your proposal. So in other words, counter argument help strengthen ethos because they demonstrate that you have considered deeply your stakeholder, that you are an authority on the thing that you're talking about, that you have done your research. You have done your research so much so that you can anticipate problems or objections that your stakeholder audience might have to your research. And again, this ethos is strengthened by anticipating objections, which requires you to have imagined what your audience member cares about, acknowledging that other options exist out there. And remember, alternatives to your proposal do exist because your proposal has a debatable thesis. That's like debatability is embedded in the process. And finally, it gives you an opportunity to consider how your reasons and evidence hold up against counterargument. So in theory, just even considering counterargument and addressing counterargument in your reasons and evidence will strengthen your overall argument. Now you have 3 options in addressing counterargument: refute, concede, and ignore. And if we go back to the original example, which is that you're asking your roommate to use, if you can use their car to drive to a concert at Red Rocks. If you were to refute their counterargument that you're a slob, you would say, actually, no, I'm not. Check out my closet. It is extremely organized. Thus, I will treat your car very well. You can see that my organization will also transfer over to my car usage. If you were to concede the argument, you would say something like, yeah, I know I'm a slob, but I promise I treat other people's stuff differently than mine, and I will do my very best to be a better version of myself for you when I'm borrowing your car. To ignore the counterargument might be that you steal their keys and drive the car anyway, which of course would be the wrong thing to do. Now, in the realm of A3, ignoring the counterargument would probably be not addressing that in the objections section of your proposal. So let's practice. Let's take a look at Dan Hughes's proposal, and let's see what kinds of counterarguments he identifies and then how he responds. So I have the proposal over here, and he has in this section potential objections and responses. And again, you could call this section sort of what you will, but this is his counterargument section. Let's just take a couple of the first 2. Skate parks under bridges are hidden, allowing for illegal activities. That's the counterargument. He says, as the Burnside skate park has proven, skate parks under bridges actually discourage crime in the area. So he's refuting the claim. You're saying it causes illegal activities. Actually, it discourages crime, and here's the evidence for why. And he's using evidence. Now, second one, there's seismic activity. Traffic safety engineers design such bridges specifically to withstand the weight and stress of consistent car travel. If the bridge is safe for auto travel, one can reasonably assume it is safe for skateboarders beneath the bridge. Here, it's a concession. He's saying you're right. There is seismic activity. However, traffic safety engineers design the bridges, yada, yada, yada. So he's using concede and refute within this potential objections and responses section in order to strengthen his proposal. So in conclusion, over the next couple of days, you're going to think about counterarguments for your proposal. And in thinking about those counterarguments for your proposal, you're going to have to consider what kind of research you'll need to do to engage with counterarguments. Where will you find this kind of information? You will know that working to address counterarguments is a way of building ethos, so it strengthens your argument overall. I want you to also consider that addressing counterarguments in a way that matters and is relevant to your audience is a way of making strong choices in the development of your argument. And finally, the cognitive process of considering another person's point of view, in this case your audiences and their concerns, is an exercise in empathy, which is a skill that travels well beyond the walls of the CO 150 classroom. Okay, so what do you do with all this information? I'm hoping that you're well on your way to developing your A3 proposal. And for Friday, what I would like you to do is give us, and I've posted this in the discussion board, but you will write a discussion post in which you outline your tree, meaning what it is that you're proposing, the reasons and evidence you're going to give to your stakeholder audience. And then I'd like you to consider what kinds of counter arguments your audience might harness. You will also receive feedback from your peers on Monday about a couple of suggestions that they might have for potential counter arguments. In addition to that, I have given you a student sample called Proposal for School Garden in Lesotho. And I would like you to read this student sample. It's a really great student sample. You'll notice the figures, etc., the design of this proposal. And I want you to read it all, and then I would like you to go to the counter arguments section called cost benefit analysis potential objections. And I'd like you to take a look at what she's done, and I want you to comment on how well she's addressed counter arguments and how she's addressed those specifically. Has she conceded, refuted, ignored, that sort of thing? What kind of work has she done to address counter arguments here? Thank you so much.